Hello students, in today's class I will teach you about the most common material advantage, the bishop pair. You often hear grandmasters talk about it, but you probably don't know why it's good and how to use it properly. I will first explain you a few concepts and then show you an instructive practical example. Before anything, let's make sure we're talking about situations where you have two bishops and your opponent does not. The most interesting and effective concept is the one regarding the color that you need to attack versus the color you need to defend. With two bishops, you will usually be putting the pawns on the color of opponent's bishop and attacking the color that opponent does not have the bishop of. Where does this logic come from? Let's take a look at the position in front of us. We have two bishops for white against bishop and a knight for black. In total, black has three minor pieces that could attack dark squares, two knights and a bishop. White has only two minor pieces that could attack dark squares. Therefore, in theory, and a lot of times in practice, black can conquer the dark color squares. If there's going to be a weak square on a dark color, black should be able to win it. If there's a weak pawn on the dark color, black should be able to exert a lot of pressure against that. On the other hand, white has a light square bishop and black does not. Because black lost their light square bishop, they want to put the pawns on the light color, in general, in order to defend the color that they don't have the bishop of. And they will try to attack the dark squares. For white, it's the other way around. They know that opponent has an advantage on the dark squares, therefore white will try to put a lot of the pawns on the dark squares and will attack the light color since opponent does not have the light square bishop. Let's take a look. Imagine that right now white is only playing with pawns temporarily to illustrate one important concept. For example, now we're going to be putting the pawns on the light color. What you will notice is that this dark square bishop is feeling like fish in the ocean. Later it could be combined with something like the queen, and it's completely unchallenged. You could imagine batteries being created later. If your castle kingside, you could even get mated. Right now, let's compare that to white placing the pawns on the dark color. You could see how the dark square strategy is no longer working for black, and the dark square bishop is restricted. Now we can challenge the light squares. This opponent does not have the light square bishop, and we do. That's where this concept of fighting for the specific color is coming from, because of the imbalance in the material correlation that we have. Other important lessons are that the player with the bishop pair also wants to open up the position. Endgame is good for them, so they're often not against exchanging the queens as well. A lot of times we will seek to gain space with pawns, and last but not least, at the right moment, we can exchange one of the bishops in order to obtain a bigger advantage of other sort, like a winning endgame, for instance. Let's see how the great world champion, the first world champion Steinitz, is going to get a technical win from seemingly close to an equal position. All that black has right now is two bishops and maybe temporary lead in development, but there's no way we can develop the initiative and take advantage of our developed rooks, and soon white should be able to develop their rooks as well. How did Steinitz start this game? Well, he notices that opponent has two minor pieces that could fight on the dark color, or you could just notice that white has only the dark square bishop. That's the color we need to defend. We'll try to attack the light squares because we have the light square bishop. Of course, the color of the pawns is a generalization. If you could put the pawns on the other color, which is maybe the wrong color according to this concept, but you do win a piece, you do win a pawn, you obtain a pass pawn, you make their king weak, you create a weak pawn or double pawns. For any good reason, you're going to break this principle just like any other principle. You don't castle if you could win the queen, obviously. However, here Steinitz starts with the move b6. So they're going to be placing the pawns on their color in order to further restrict the white dark square bishop. White plays h3, the bishop drops back to e6, white played rook d1, and black continues with the right strategy, putting the pawns on the dark color. White played bishop g5. Steinitz was not afraid of playing f6 because he knows that he is only temporarily closing the bishop. Later you could always play f5. Bishop dropped back to f4, we have king to f7. After f3, black plays g5. We have an exchange of rooks, and then he even plays h6. So from here on, black probably wants to play f5 and f4. Black is gaining space on both sides of the board. It's much easier to do with 2 bishops. You could imagine how hard it would be for white to push the pawns against such strong bishop pair, which is aiming at the pawns on the back. White played rook e1. Black plays f5 and threatens to go f4 with even further space on the king side. So white stops them with playing f4. Here Steinitz plays bishop f6. And here I would like you to pause the video because you have to improve the black's position and further make an evolution of the black's army. There is no tactic. Pause the video and see how can you improve the black's position. So black plays a5 and a4 in order to win more space on the queen side, and perhaps if we get a5 and a4 and white takes, which likely is going to be forced to, we can even create some weak pawns on the queen side in the white's camp. White plays knight to c1, black goes a4, and if we're allowed, we're going to play a3. Here white stops black from doing that by playing a3 himself. Black further increases the scope of the bishop, and we call this bishop as a dominating against the knight. So knight is dominated by the bishop because any square that the knight could go to is controlled by our bishop. White plays king f2, and here black does something magical. He thought that now it is the moment to finally say goodbye to the bishop pair because he's getting other type of big advantage. He plays pawn takes f4, and white is unable to take with the pawn due to bishop h4. White took with the bishop, and here he plays bishop g5 in order to attempt and win the d2 square. As if we can invade, we're going to win b2, after which white's position simply collapses. Now we're threatening to take and play rook d2, so white takes. And then plays king to e3. But unfortunately right now, even though white's king could be guarding the square d2, black can further improve the king, improve the pawn structure, and white is always susceptible to the skewer on the e-file. Black played king f6, white played h4, we have capture, capture, and then black gets into a winning endgame, all calculated by Steinitz, which is a winning endgame because white can only move the knight away in a way that it goes into a king and pawn endgame. And there is no hope for white here as the h-pawn drops, and the rest is history. It's all she wrote. Black wins the game. If you enjoyed today's lesson, please consider hiring me as your personal online chess coach. My contacts are on the right. Let me know if I should make part 2 or part 3 of the 2 bishops topic. I have many more examples to share. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next class.